I'm sorry? Yes, yes. Hi, guys. I'm David Weber, and I am still working on the rear end of a pretty bad migraine from last night. Fortunately, we don't have the bright lights we had this morning, so I don't have to be super cool and put on my sunglasses. But if you notice me sort of going, that's probably what it is, okay? Maybe not, but probably. Okay. The topic before us is how do you maintain creativity in a long series? I have no idea why they think I might have some insight into that. And in some ways, it's a loaded question, because the question, to my mind, isn't so much how do you maintain creativity in a long series, as it is how do you maintain creativity in a long writing career. Because you can always say, you know what, I'm done with this series, and just kind of cut it where it is, and you will probably have people coming after you with pitchforks and things if you do that. But you can't just turn off your entire writing career unless you're done. So you have to be able to remain creative over a long period of time. Now, I have found I am a universe builder. The first thing I do when I get ready to write a novel or a series is to build the universe. Before I build the characters, before I do anything else, I build the universe. In the case of the Honor Harrington books, I knew that I was going to have a female protagonist, that she was going to be a naval commander, and that she was going to have this weird cat on her shoulder. Okay? That was just the image that I had of her before I started. And I then wrote an 85,000-word tech Bible for the Honorverse before I did anything else. I built the polities, I built the technology, I built the history of the diaspora, not in complete and total detail, but in enough detail that I could slot additional details into it as I developed the series. It was only after that that I really started building the character of Honor Harrington, and the character of Honor Harrington evolved more than it was built. I think most writers will probably find that that's true to some extent, that as you create the circumstances that your character faces, your character reveals aspects of his or her personality to you that you may not have realized were there. And they get incorporated into your view of the character going forward. That's a process that happens with almost every character. I think the key to maintaining creativity in a long series is to recognize that that process also applies to the universe in which the character is living. As you build interactions between political units, as you introduce new technology, the template changes, and the template directs you into where you need to go next with the universe, and that in turn gives you guidance for where the characters who are developing within that universe need to go in terms of their function within that universe, while another part of you is keeping track of who they have met, who they have learned to love, who they have lost, that is going to determine how they are developing as individuals. So it's a complex equation that never balances, but is always ongoing. And you have to be able to go with the flow of that if you're going to maintain creativity. If you start trying to force a character into a channel because you've decided that's what you need the character to do for plot purposes, and the character doesn't want to go, then you have a problem with the plot. And you need to go back and rethink the plot, in my mind, before you rethink the character. In a long series, absolutely, if you have a character that you force to do something which is alien to that character, which seems alien to that character to you, then it's going to seem that way to your readers as well. And they're going to be saying, well, you needed Honor to take a fall, so she made a mistake here. All right? So if the character and the plot aren't connecting in your visualization, my advice is to look first at the plot and second at the character. Sometimes you can solve a plot problem like that by using a different character to effect the same result. And then your character, who wouldn't cooperate by doing it, just has to cope with the consequences of having it happen anyway. It's like, I'm not going there. Oh, crap, he went there. Now I have to deal with it. And you can get some really interesting turns in the story and in your character development if you do that. But, again, I build universes. I update my tech Bible regularly. I maintain a timeline of the critical elements in my character's past. I do it within the context of each novel. If you look at my timeline, on it will be the date at which a given book begins. That title will be in it, and then the events in that book that are significant to Honor or one of the other major characters or one of the major political developments are all listed. When I got into sort of the end game of the Honorverse, with Michelle Hinkey over here carrying out operations and Honor over here and another bunch of guys over there, I had to start maintaining much more detailed timelines because I had people acting and reacting at the end of communications chains that might be a month or more long. And so you'd have a notation like courier boat departs Manticore for Talbot. And then I would skip ahead and say, you know, this is the point at which it arrives. So there'd be a calendar entry there. And then I'd fill in between because I had everything pegged. Okay, Michelle can't react to what Honor told her until the courier boat gets to Talbot Station. So none of that's going to impinge on anything that's going on over here. And that's how you maintain sanity in the author while simultaneously writing the book. But I think that kind of note-keeping is also conducive to creativity as long as you don't get into the attitude of someone who is checking off boxes. Everything that I do in terms of character lists, of timelines, of tech Bible entries, all of that is designed to be the floor on which I stand so that I don't have to be panicking about that kind of stuff, which lets me be more creative with the characters and the situation as it develops and it evolves. And part of that is the fact that I know my continuity is solid behind me. So I'm not worried as much as I might be about an oopsie where I inadvertently have someone do something that I established in book 3 was impossible. Okay? I think another key for me to maintaining creativity in a long series has been to take breaks from it. And that's one reason originally why I had as many series ongoing as I did. Because if I felt myself kind of reaching an impasse or burning out a little bit on Honor Harrington, I could go write in another series for a couple of books before I came back. Now the problem is that series are kind of like amoeba, okay? They multiply. And all of a sudden you discover that, wait, I don't have enough time to write all of my series. And people are like, when is the next book in Series A coming out? And you're like, well, when I get around to writing it. Well, I want you to write it now. Okay, which of my other series do you want me to not write in so I can... None of them. I just want you to write book A now. You know, you're like, wait, I didn't do that, you know. So probably one key to maintaining creativity in a long series would be to not write as many series as I write, because then you can switch back and forth between a smaller number. You know, somebody said, for those of you who've read my Safehold books, somebody suggested, well, we just need to make a pica and, you know, download your memories to it and let them take over on one series. I said, it wouldn't do any good to some bitch start spinning off fresh series. You know, I know what would happen. But I went to a memorial service for Roger Zelazny. I was writing with George Martin. George and Roger had known each other forever. And George had not known that he had prostate cancer up until about a month and a half before we lost him. And I'd known for about a year ahead of that. But anyway, George is like, I can't believe he's gone. And I said, I know, it hurts. He said, but he wasn't finished yet. I said, but it's not like the world didn't have a chance to see what this man could do. And he said, yeah, but he wasn't finished yet. I said, George, if Roger had been 96, he wouldn't have been finished yet. Okay, I mean, that's the way that it works. And I think that's the way that it works for most of us who have the storytelling bug. Okay, we're going to go on writing until the dark comes down, if you've read your Plague Dogs, okay? Because it's who we are. Now, very few of us are going to do it as well as, say, I don't know, Jack Williamson did it. But that's who and what we do. That's who we are and what we do. All right. I would say that probably the key element to maintaining creativity, I'm just going to throw this out and then I'm going to take some questions, specific questions, because this is a very subjective issue, guys. What helps one guy maintain creativity is not going to be the silver bullet necessarily for somebody else. So, maybe if we address some specific issues out there, we can open some other avenues. But for me, what maintains creativity is caring about the characters. Because that means that I need to find out what happens next in their lives. And unfortunately, nothing happens in their lives until I get around to writing it. And so that maintains my creativity and my impetus to write the books. Okay? And let me add one other thing. Most of you guys, okay, I said this morning. I sold my first novel in 1989. Yes, I'm that old. And I had sold I'd sold 5 more before the first one came out in print. And I've been traditionally published my entire life. Okay? Seriously, I joke about it, but the first Honor Harrington novel was written the year before Al Gore invented the internet. Okay? So, I mean, that's how long I've been doing this. And what that means is that my marketing experience is not going to be particularly germane to most of you, unless you're looking to break into traditional publishing as well. The rest of what I've learned in 30-plus years of doing this about how to tell stories and how to create characters, that is completely transferable across the difference in marketing platforms, I believe. And that is really why I'm here today, okay? So right this minute, we are 32 minutes into a 45-minute presentation. That means we have 13 minutes for questions and answers. Does anybody have a question? Aha, I was beginning to worry.
Do you have a daily or monthly process that you go through to keep yourself going?
Yes and no and not right now. Let me clarify. I had COVID in January, and I was hospitalized for 10 days in intensive care. I got out, and for 2 months I couldn't do much of anything, so just sit there. Then I had sort of a dumpster fire in a collaborative project with Eric Flint. It wasn't Eric's fault, but the manuscript that he got me 8 months late was totally unusable the way that it was. And so I went into frenzied rewrite mode, and we got, for those of you who have published traditionally, you'll understand what I'm saying here, we delivered the final pages of the manuscript 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the book shipped in hardcover. That's what the production window on it was. And I got to the end of that, and I was like, that was the end of September, and I was like, okay, I am now officially dead. And then my son graduated, went off to Paris Island and all kinds of things. So I actually have not gotten very much done since the end of September. When I am working, okay, I am in the office one way or another pretty much from early morning until I come in to cook dinner because I'm the cook. And I don't have so much a specific process that I follow as what do I need to do today to move it forward. My goal when I'm actually working on a book is to produce a minimum of 5,000 words a day. My average is between 75 and 10. The most that I ever produced in one day was 38,000 words. And then I basically slept for 48 hours, and went back and went to work. I write, okay, one thing I do is I write in complete chapters, and the first thing I do when I sit down to work every day is I review the last 3 days' work. I go through and I edit the last 3 days of work that I did, so that by the time I get to the end of the book, everything from my original draft has been edited multiple times before I get to the end of it and have to do the flow through. That does a couple of things for me. One is it gives me a chance to spot errors. It gives me a chance to polish, and it also builds momentum going forward to when I hit the new material that I'm going to do that day. I'm back into the flow of the story because I put myself into it by doing that editing process. I highly recommend that to almost anyone as just a tool for getting yourself up and running. Okay? Yes?
Do you have any specific TV shows, books, or movies that you watch to help with your creativity?
No, not really. I said this morning that every storyteller, in terms of that storyteller's voice, stands on the shoulders of every story that they've ever read or heard, because we learn from all of them. And this is a craft that we're practicing, not an art form, in my judgment. So probably every book and movie that I've ever read, one way or another, has contributed. But I think what's contributed more than anything else is my love for history. I was a military and diplomatic history major. That's what I was going to teach at the college level. I don't know if it shows in the books today, right? Yeah. But you can't study history without studying people. And I think that's one of the things that pushes me to create characters and then put them in situations. A lot of people make the mistake of assuming that I am taking periods in history and recreating them. I am taking periods in history and using them as initial building blocks, and then I'm going totally different places. I went to incredible pains in the Honor Harrington universe to convince everybody that the People's Republic of Haven was revolutionary France, okay? Tennis court oath, Robespierre, Committee of Public Safety, and the whole time it was the U.S. Constitution that had been subverted, and Tom Theismann, who I'd introduced you to in the second book, was going to be Cincinnatus and restore it. Okay, but I was like, yeah, yes, see the pretty French birdie over here, kind of thing. I have to admit that there are moments when you plant an Easter egg or a pun or whatever in there when you kind of giggle. That helps the whole creativity thing. It's like, oh, they're so going to be pissed with me over this one, kind of thing. Okay, yeah.
How much of your creativity would you say is involved with interpersonal relationships with other people, or do you try to keep that completely separate and
You mean
like
within
bouncing ideas off of people?
I've never been particularly shy about discussing what I was thinking about, where I was going. Very few of my story ideas have come from talking with someone else. That's not to say that they haven't been shaped by talking with someone else. Generally speaking, when I am brainstorming on a story with anybody else, it's someone that I'm already going to be doing the collaboration with. Okay, and there's a lot of DNA swap going on in that process, but that's pretty much going to be one-on-one. Okay, in terms of conversations at conventions or something like that inspires a story idea, not so much. And it's not that that can't be totally valid. Okay. It's just that the way that my head works, I'm in the position of having way too many stories to write in the time that I've got. Okay, now that's a much better problem than having a contract and no idea what you're going to write about. All right, but it's a pain in the ass when you realize, you know what, I'm never going to get all these stories told, no matter what I do. I have an entire series of historical novels plotted out, starting with the American Revolution and ending with Desert Storm, following an American naval family, and I will never get to write them because I won't have time, and people go, no, we need another Honor Harrington, we need another Safehold, we need another, okay? And so that can be the moment when you realize that you're not going to get all of your children after all. That's a painful one, okay? And I've just had to accept that there are at least 4 series that I want to write that I will never get written. I could probably do them if I was willing to do literary sharecropping collaboration and just tell somebody else, here, you go write it. But I can't do that. I can't do a collaboration where I'm not at least 100% involved in creating the story, even if I then let my collaborator go off and write the rough draft. Okay? And my head just won't work any other way. So, like I say, there are books I will never get written, but yeah. Do we have another question?
What are classic pitfalls that you have fallen or you see other people falling for with the creative or with the day-to-day process?
I'm sorry, what
right?
are the what that I've...
With like the pitfalls of the creative process where like, the sinkholes.
Yeah. What are examples of the creative process that I've seen people work for people or fail for people? Fail. Okay. The ones that I've seen failed the most have not so much been in the creative process, but in the ability of the creator to show a gnat's worth of intelligence in where they created. Okay? There's a book that I used to carry around with me for how not to write. Okay? And among other things, let's see, you found out that the special weapon of the British Special Air Service was the liquid nitrogen grenade, which thrown into a pool with water pouring into it would freeze the water pouring into it and stop the leak. That was just one of the things wrong with it. They also had the stealth aircraft developed during the Nixon administration with all the work done in Antarctica so no one would know about it, that had been hanging upside down in a hangar because the hangar had capsized, and it was suspended by its twin vertical stabilizers, and when it finally rolled back upright, there was still fuel in the tanks. It would fire. The pilot of a Harrier could climb into the controls of this aircraft and fly it perfectly, and it shot the hell out of a bunch of F-22s because it was better. Oh, and its stealth system was powered by a fission reactor. There was nothing at all wrong with that author's creativity, only his brain. Okay? So that would probably be the biggest fail that I've seen of creativity at all. I think that in another vein, you can see examples of people whose creativity have failed them and they don't know where to go with a series. And they keep going anyway. Now, I had actually a similar situation arise in the Honor Harrington books because I had a complete idea of where the series was going, and Eric Flint and I were collaborating. He did a short story, and it pulled events forward. And all of a sudden, I lost a 25, 30-year cushion that I thought I had in there, in which I could kill Honor off, and her children could grow up to deal with the problem. Okay? I also lost a 25 or 30-year cushion I had for the Solarian League to get a clue about where it was in terms of its warfighting capability vis-a-vis Manticore. And all of a sudden, that was all gone. So the first thing was I couldn't kill Honor. Well, that did not break my heart. Okay, I mean, I had a scene, man, there would not have been a dry eye in the house, okay, at the end of it when somebody stands up in the diner on Sphinx and says, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the immortal memory, kind of thing. I mean, all the stops would have been pulled out. It would have been magnificent. And I would have lived in Montana and raised rabbits under an assumed name for a year or so before I came back to Greenville. But I couldn't do that anymore. But I had a situation in which I had to fight a war in which one side was totally incapable of fighting the other side. And then while I was working in that was when I face planted into the floor in Atlanta and got the concussion. That didn't help. And so there's about 3, I think, novels in the Honorverse canon where essentially I'm working on getting my feet back under me so that I could do Uncompromising Honor and bring that whole story arc to an end. That's exactly how I expected to end it, but I expected that to be Honor's son, Raoul, giving that ultimatum to the Solarian League. I'm not at all sorry that Honor's not dead. I really like the way that Uncompromising Honor came out. She got to be there for it, and if you haven't read To End in Fire yet, we do bring her back out of retirement, at least briefly, for a very satisfying moment in her life. But it was a problem. It was undeniably a problem in writing the series, and it created some issues that I'm still not totally satisfied with, but you had to get from point A to point B. All right. Now, the error that I'm talking about where creativity is concerned is when you don't know what point B is. Your problem isn't how do I get from A to B, but it's kind of like, where am I going with this? I don't know. I think I'll just go. All right. You need to have, if not endpoints, at least waypoints laid out in your mind. And for what it's worth, I think that when you are talking about an ongoing, lengthy series, your waypoints need to be at least 2 books down the line, because you need to know in the book that you're writing what you need to do to prepare for the next waypoint. And as you get towards the end of this book, you need to establish the 3rd waypoint. Do you see what I'm saying? Do not try to do it in detail. Do not try to say, well, I need Honor to be here on this day or whatever. What I'm saying is this is the point towards which you are writing, and you will find out how that point resolves itself when you get there. If you tell yourself too insistently how it will end when you get there, you will not get there. You will get somewhere else, and you won't like it as much. Okay, you have to allow I hate to say this, but I don't know a better way to say it. You have to let the characters have their say. You have to let the universe have its say about what you're doing. Your job is to know both of them well enough that, given the circumstances you've created, you know how they will react and go from there. Okay? One of the things that readers read long series for, series that don't work well, in my judgment, have protagonists that don't change. That's one of the reasons the Star Trek novelizations never worked for me, because you were not allowed to make significant changes in any of the established characters. So all the best of the early Star Trek novels dealt with secondary characters, and you got to watch them grow and change. But even there, no matter what happened with them, it had no impact on Kirk or Spock or McCoy. Okay? I can't write that way. I just plain can't. It's not that I don't want to. Well, I don't want to. But it's also that I can't not do my best work. So to me, the evolution of the characters is an absolutely critical part of the ongoing storyline. And that right there will maintain a lot of creativity for you. Another thing that I recommend, and other people may not agree with me on this, but if I'm going to insert a character into a story and that character is going to appear in more than a couple of paragraphs, that character has a name and a rank and a gender and a specialization and a personality hook of some sort and a physical description that includes height, hair, and eye coloring. Okay, that gives me continuity if I want to come back to them. It requires me to come up with that information. It fleshes them out in my own mind, which then affects how I handle them in the text. And they provide a bench that I can draw on in the unlikely event in one of my books that a main character should, I don't know, die. You know, I understand that that happens a lot in other people's books, you know, but that's, I could not begin to tell you how many significant characters in the Honorverse grew out of named secondary characters who were only going to appear, as far as I knew, when I introduced them in one book or even in one chapter, who then wound up becoming characters in their own rights.
First off, thank you for not killing Honor.
Yeah, you know, I knew it would have been a high-risk move, but my God. You remember the scene where she finds out that Alistair McKeon has died?
Oh, yeah.
That's how the reader would have found out that she'd died.
Right.
That would have been all the warning you got. She was trapped on a bridge. She was wounded. The bridge had lost pressure. They couldn't get her out of her skin suit to treat her. They couldn't get the bridge pressurized. You know, Nimitz was already gone, you know, kind of thing. And her last words were, "Tell the queen, for God's sake, let it end here." Okay? And then you find out with McKeon that she's dead. And every reader out there is going, he did it. I'm going to kill his ass, you know, kind of thing. But it would have been the culmination of her life, okay? And I think that readers will always forgive you for killing even a significant character if you do it in a way that isn't Tasha Yar dying in Next Generation, where it's like, you know what, we don't know what to do with this character, let's kill her off. All right? But you were going to, yes.
But my question is, okay, you've mentioned that, you know, we write about everything that we've read and listened to, et cetera. I'm running into a problem on creativity on how do I get creative without plagiarizing? You know, the books
Okay,
that I've
that's
read before.
a fair question. That's a fair question. Well, there's plagiarism and there's derivation. Okay. Let's see, how do I put this? I'm not sure what your particular area that you're looking at is, so I'm going to put this in terms of military science fiction, which is what I write. Okay, so you're working along and you realize that the structure that you're working on here is very similar to what you've seen in another, the rank structure, the military organization that you're dealing with is very similar to what you've seen in another novel, etc. All right, my suggestion there would be to go back and look at where that author probably went to find the pieces that he or she used to build that military, because most of them are going to be derived in good military fiction. They're going to be derived from real-life military institutions and organizations. And if you can drop back to there, then you can build your own organization on the same historical platform that they used, but you could be looking at totally different rank titles, a different history for the organization, etc. You see what I'm saying? That's one problem that you can approach. Another thing that you can do is bear in mind that much as we would love to in writing fiction, first, you can't copyright a title, okay? And second, you can't copyright an idea. Okay, what you can copyright is the way in which you use and manipulate and weave with the idea that you've had, okay? So if someone has done it in a way that seems to you to really, really work, what you need to do is look at why that works for you. What makes this treatment of it work so well that I find myself moving into duplicating it, okay? Because what you're really duplicating are the reasons that it worked. And if you can get to that on your own, rather than just saying, well, this is the way that this person did it, therefore it is the only way it can work, that might help. Yes, ma'am.
So since you've written so many books, how do you stop yourself from repeating language or phrases or recycling secondary character personalities, like in later books, or do you not worry about that? Or how do we avoid it?
Well, I think every author has certain turns of phrase that are going to recur in their writing. Okay, one for me is such as there was and what there was of it. Okay, and that reappears a lot in my work. I don't think that you can completely eradicate that, because your writing voice is so much a part of your speaking voice, bleeds over into your writing voice if you're like most people. Okay, my narration is very informal. Okay, there's a lot of contractions, a lot of kind of thing, and I'm perfectly happy breaking that third wall and then going back behind it as I write. That's just the way that I write. Okay, it's not going to work for everybody. If you have a phrase that you know that you overuse, my advice would be write the book and then do a global search for that phrase. And each time that it comes up, see, okay, can I change this, or is this in fact the phrase I need here? And just approach it from that perspective. If you can make a list for yourself of words that you overuse, of constructions that you overuse. For example, I overuse the word that when I write rough draft. And one of the reasons I do is that I use Dragon Naturally Speaking. And so a lot of what I'm doing is kind of like naturally speaking, and people overuse that when they write. And so one of the things that I do in those editorial passes that I was talking about is look for every single that I can terminate with extreme prejudice and get out of the mix. And it reduces word count, and it also makes things flow better, in my opinion. You can do that with other words that you know that you overuse, if you can just kind of keep them in your forebrain. But the thing is that you need to look at it, I think, this is my view of it, you need to look at it as something to be fixed after you got the bare bones of the story told, not as something that is going to distract you from telling the story in the first place. Get the story told, get it written. Robert Heinlein said, don't be afraid to write what you meant the first time around, but I will guarantee you that man edited a lot. All right? There is no reason in the world why we shouldn't do it too. Okay? So I guess what I'm saying is that in an instance, if you're concerned about that, you need to be your own critical first reader when you're doing the tweaking and the editing process. Reusing secondary characters or primary characters, I can honestly say that has not been a problem for me, and I'm not sure why. Okay? Some of my favorite authors, it's like you can read one of their novels, and by 15 pages in, you've identified which character is who in this iteration, because that's the stories that this guy tells. And they're good enough that you kind of forgive him for it, but it's kind of like you already know who's going to be the spoiled aristocrat who's going to come around at the end, that kind of thing. The same thing can happen with characters. Well, this is the same guy with the name changed, all right? And I can't really tell you how to fix that problem because it's one that I haven't had. And I don't know why not. It's a case of my characters being who they are and not wanting to be anybody else. I'm sorry, I know that sounds all vague and zen and metaphysical and stuff, but I just really, that's not an issue that I know how to fix because it's never one that I've had a lot of trouble with on my own, all right? Story concepts, there you just have to watch yourself, okay? I mean, if you look at the characters that I create and the situations that they face, there are constant threads in most of my series. For example, it was several years before I realized that the key element in a David Weber hero is that that character takes responsibility. I mean, that's really what sums it up. That's the core that all of their other values rest on. And I tend to write about people who find themselves in positions where they're taking responsibility, puts them at odds with institutions and that kind of thing. So to that extent, I do have this constant recurring thread that could be considered recycling. But then you populate each story with characters who are sufficiently different and societies that are sufficiently different that while there's a resonance between the two series, there's certainly not a case of Siamese twin. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, we have about 4 minutes left. Do we have one more question? No. Did I see somebody stirring? My heart is broken. I thought surely someone would have one more question so that I could run over time. All right, well, oh, wait, I saw movement. No, he was just getting his stuff. It's so sad. All right, well, let me just finish by saying that writers have very intimate relationships with their stories. You can't create them if you don't. And part of the secret to maintaining creativity is maintaining that intimacy on your part. You have to care. You have to care about what happens to the characters and the societies and the countries in your books. Because if you don't care, first of all, the reader will know you don't care. Secondly, if you don't care, why are you going to spend time with these people? And if you're not wanting to spend time with them, why do you give a rat's ass what happens in their universe? And if you don't give a rat's ass what happens in their universe, why waste creativity on it? So the number one secret to maintaining creativity is to remain involved with your characters. And what will happen is that as you remain involved with them, you will continue to involve them in situations that involve you and the reader and compel you to create the world in which they're going to deal with, who they are and what they have to cope with. So don't make the mistake of expecting to sit down at dinner tomorrow night with Honor Harrington. But for you, she better not be just a fictional construct. She has to be somebody you really care about. Because if she's not, you're not going to be able to convince other people to care about her either. Not over the long haul. You're not going to have a 20, 25 book story arc about a character that you don't care about. And that, to me, is the true secret of remaining involved with and creative in a long-running storyline. And now, since there were no more questions, I am actually going to end 1 minute and 46 seconds early. Shame on all of you. Thank you for coming.